my name is Tori Shendell Cox, and I'm the Virginia G. Schrader Curator of Art at the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science. And today, for this episode of Cultural Insights Interview in the Creative Sector, I have a dear friend and colleague, Juilee Decker, on board, and she's going to walk us through a very unique project that has been going on since the beginning of this crisis, and actually was the impetus for this type of series for creating these oral histories. So Julie's going to talk about the Journal of the Plague Year, an archive of COVID-19. Julie, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tori, so much. It's nice to see you, and it's nice to be here together. So the project that I'm a part of is called A Journal of the Plague Year, and it's an initiative that was started by colleagues at Arizona State University, and they run a public history program and a number of other liberal arts inspired programs. And the idea behind this is to invite communities across the world, primarily in the US, but across the world, to document what their experience is like during COVID. And the name of the website and this repository, which I'll talk about in a second, A Journal of the Plague Year, is of course a riff on Daniel Defoe's book, which is a fictional account of the plague in England, specifically in London. And so this idea of chronicling, like Defoe does in a fictionalized way, but we are chronicling ourselves and our lives. And so the inspiration, the namesake, is of course a work of literature, but the sort of characters and sort of unfolding of the narrative is all of our own accord, and it's all of our sort of own space and what we contribute to it. And so the framing for it is a documentary and closer look by individuals or groups about their experiences during the plague. And we have curators and community contributors from all over. So of course, Tori is one of the contributors, and this Cultural Insights is one of the repositories that we are collecting and that we have added to the site. And so thinking of, one space of activity, like Tori is doing, of course, in this amazing work, but then thinking about what other people's stories and narratives are as well. And these can be on an individual level, like literally one person's story that they contribute, or they can be on an institutional level led by people like Tori and Tom in Evansville, Indiana. And I should say, as an aside, I mean, I'm in Rochester, New York. So, this idea of meeting people and getting to know people and knowing their experiences is really disclosing the ways in which the COVID-19 is not geographically based, that it's a humanitarian crisis, and it's a pandemic that we all are struggling with in our own way. So the idea is that everyone who is interested, willing, and able can go online or connect with someone who can go online with them or for them, or as a conduit for their story, and share their story by contributing bits of information that include a title, a description, your name as the contributor, and a date of the experience or whatever the document is. And then we have some language in the form that's online that allows people to assign what we're calling hashtags, or words or terms that help to define that experience. And then the information that is uploaded is then curated by a consortium of individuals like myself and colleagues from all over, who then go on the back end and then look at and try to refine the information, not editing, but just refine it and group it together so that we can keep collections together. So for instance, your work at Evansville is housed with the same shared word, the name of your institution, so that if people use that term, they can then find everything that you've uploaded. So it's a way to take the little bits of sand, the little grains of sand of every single person's story, and then bring them together into this shape, to mold them together into this community experience, much like, I'll say, a sandcastle or something that's beautiful, as opposed to the horror that is the pandemic that we're facing. So that's kind of the framing for the project. And then my involvement is, I've been involved since the beginning. It was begun mid-March, and I've been involved since the beginning, and in various ways. I'm a contributor, so Some of the stories that are my earliest accounts include my #fail at making bread when I tried to make bread because I wasn't going to the store. Didn't turn out, so we have documentary evidence of that. There's evidence of I was standing in line in the store and just the ways in which the space of the store now seems different because you have a specific amount of distance that you have to be from someone else, and those kind of daily experiences. Those were my entries from March, April area. So that's one way I've contributed. And then I had my students in my courses, of course, when everyone was shifting to online, whether they wanted to or not, in the spring, I had my students contributing, documenting their experiences during COVID. And then I've played a role in connecting museums and institutions that are cultural institutions to the archive and trying to help them to bring their content online in whatever shape that might look like, whether that's a survey that we've been conducting about museum experiences or experiences of museum workers, that data, working with various communities across pretty much the Eastern US in bringing their content to the archive in whatever way that might work best. And so, yeah, so I've had kind of the micro experience of my own personal view, bringing my students to the space, and then working with museums and institutions.
And then what, in your opinion, what is the so what aspect of this? So once we have this collected, we move past the pandemic, hopefully soon. In your mind, what is going to be the ultimate reasoning for this, the ultimate tool that this is going to serve?
That's a good question. As a historian, I see the value in what we call micro narratives. So one person's story in a sea of stories, or one person's perspective in a space where there's an archival silence, where we just don't have that information. So I see these stories that people contribute, and we're over 8,000, I forget our exact number right now. I see each one of these as a window into an experience. And then when you couple those together, whether it's with this clustering of a few or more than that, you really get a sense of the prismatic view of the pandemic. And for me, living through it, as we all are, you know, I've even forgotten what it was like in the very, very beginning of March, the March and April phases, of being quite terrified, literally, to go outside my house, outside the threshold of my door. And I've forgotten that. And it was only when I was kind of looking at someone else's perspectives and stories from those early accounts in the US that it kind of reminded me. And that's only, I mean, it's September now, that's only 6 months ago, and how that space of time, we've had so much of a distance in that. So I think as a historian, it's the micro narrative, the seeing through and pulling together and relieving ourselves of the burdens of archival silence so that we can have a completer narrative. And then I think just in terms of documentation, trying to understand experiences of individuals and communities that are going through something right now, as opposed to having to wait for published papers and narratives and accounts. And so I think the archive matters in those historical documentation ways, but from my students' perspective, and I'm not speaking for them, I'm just reflecting on their response papers. When the students were basically charged with the task to add items to the archive, you know, it was a way for me to modify an assignment and give them another assignment that they could reasonably do. One of the things I had them do as part of that assignment, because I teach courses in museum studies and public history, and this particular course was a museum studies course on technology and museums. And so we had to scrap one of our projects, and we ended up doing this as some of the points towards that project. So one of the things the students had to do was to critique the site and to go through and look at its user interface and those things. And when they were doing that, they obviously had to read some content, and this was in the early days, so we only had a couple thousand entries, about 2,000 at that time. And when they were doing that, they were seeing stories and narratives that express loneliness and isolation. And it was through that experience of being pulled from their campus and their community and their classroom and, you know, a community that they love and enjoy, and being extricated from that and going back to wherever another place was, whether that was home or some other place. And they themselves felt isolated, both in a double sense, isolated from their campus community, but also because of COVID. And in the responses that they wrote, they were commenting on the ways in which seeing someone else's experience and the narrative that that person wrote, whether it was one sentence or paragraphs, made them feel less isolated, because they saw in that narrative, even if the experience was entirely different, the expression of fear, anxiety, loss, isolation, trying to cope, struggling, dealing with death and other emotions, made them feel connected in a way that they hadn't. And, you know, the students had about 5 weeks to do this assignment, because I didn't want to like dump it on them right away. I said, you know, here's the prompt and you have until, you know, such and such day, like 4 weeks maybe, I don't remember, but they had some time. And so when they were reflecting on it, they remarked on the ways in which they felt connected in some way to someone else through this. And it was someone they didn't know. It was a quote random person who had posted just as they had posted. So there's both the historical and then there's the personal connection.
It's really powerful. And speaking of that personal connection, in your professional opinion, with the discussion of isolation and being separated, do you think that this time period has allotted more connectivity and breaking down more professional barriers? So for example, with academic professors and museum professionals, have you ever had this type of overlap where people you didn't even know came to help each other to document something that everyone thought was equally important?
That's a good question, because I hadn't reflected on that aspect of it. In my work, I tend to work a lot with different communities, and people say that I'm a connector, like I connect this person to this person, and then I sort of leave the conversation and let them do their magic, you know, whatever that is. And I think in some ways, this project and, you know, all of the collaborators from all over that we have at least 80 collaborators that are sort of doing, performing various roles. I think it has really shined a light on the way in which, when we have a shared goal, which is documenting our experience and providing the, you know, place for that documentation, when we have a shared goal that is not bound by institutions, that is not bound by the parameters of our institutions and, you know, the certain branding or the certain font or the certain language that you have to put with every single thing that you do. And that it's about the shared experience of communities, you know. So for my students, they were all RIT students, but then some of them went on and encouraged other people to contribute to this. So it wasn't, you know, an RIT project, clearly not. So I think there's a way that this project has helped us, or at least helped me and the museum community and libraries and archives and academia, really to kind of focus on what matters, and that is the community and our communities. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I think it is partially due to the fact that we all are working toward the same goal. We're all trying to document the experiences, and meeting people where they are, and really valuing all of the contributions, which is really remarkable, because you're receiving contributions from people that you do not know, who are willfully and willingly sharing their story. So yeah, I do think that.
That's powerful. And Julie, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our viewers?
You know, I think one thing that I think is interesting is the way that all of us are contributing stories and also thinking about and reflecting at the same time. And that sounds a little bit strange, but it's like you're documenting, but at the same time you're thinking and reflecting. And I hope that people have time and space to do that, whether or not they contribute to the archive or not. I really hope that people feel like their story does matter, because everyone on the planet is someone else's someone. And I think the way that we can work together to provide a space for people to share their story and to make it known is really remarkable. And I am so proud of what we're doing and what my students are doing and what our collaborators are doing, that it's really exciting for me to be a part of it and to provide a pathway for people to share their stories. Yeah, I think, do you mind if I share one story that I particularly am
Oh, please
fond of?
do.
Yeah, so there's a woman whose name is Janice Gilyard, and I'll see if I can get the link and send it to you. And she is someone I interviewed over Zoom. I've never met her in person, but she is a friend of the director of the African American Museum of Nassau County. And so that's in Nassau County, New York. So New York's a big state. I'm in Western New York. This is way over in Long Island.
Oh,
So pretty far away. I'm almost closer to you, Tori, in Indiana than I am to my friends over in Long Island. So Janice is a friend of Joycetta, who is the director of this museum. And Joycetta and I have become friends through this project. And so Joycetta said, I have a friend who has a story that you would be interested in. So what Janice has been doing is a lot of historical research and documentation and looking at her family history. And this has been a passion of hers for some time. Mm-hmm. But what she's uncovered and what she's written up as part of COVID is her family history, specifically a history of formerly enslaved individuals who are part of her family history. And so when I was able to interview her, she was recounting rather, the story of how she's uncovered all of these connections and hits on the ancestry.com and the little leaves that connect people to one another. And so the way in which she, a lifetime genealogist, has just set aside time to tell this story and to document it is a really remarkable way that, you talk about these silver linings, that COVID has given her the space to do that work and to really make meaningful a story that it wasn't an invisible story, but it's a story that's much more visible now. And that's just one example of like having an interview with someone about what they're doing during COVID. There's another woman named Ruth Hunt who I was able to interview. And she's talked about her daily walks over by the Holland Bridge or the Holland Tunnel and how there's no cars and how she's kind of seeing this space in her neighborhood, if you will, in a completely different light, and how she's been documenting that with photographs. And just the way in which this experience, once we get through the things that we need to deal with, if you enable yourself to have that time to take a pause and make use of, even if that affordance is only 5 extra minutes that you have, what are you doing with that 5 extra minutes? And so there's several of these kinds of really amazing women's stories. I say that as a feminist, and also amazing stories of people connecting very intentionally with either part of their past or part of their very present daily routine. And I'm so proud of those stories and proud that I get to know individuals who are willing to share these stories with me, because I don't really know them, but they're willing to open up and share them. And I'm a conduit for that information for our community. So.
Wow. I'm just reflecting on the pictures that woman is taking of her own community, and reflecting on the artistic human experience that she is feeling. And I'm sure she probably doesn't call herself an artist, because most humble people don't anyways, but also there is, there is a curriculum and technique and training that you need to do to become an artist to our caliber and our degree that we talk about here in the museum field. But nonetheless, why I love art is it is accessible to everybody. Art is for everyone, and art just makes you happy. I don't know how else to put it. It just It truly does. It's so remarkable. It's easy to put in a simplistic sentence that art does make you happy. And it's really rewarding to hear that as an art curator, that someone is taking this time to take these pictures and document her experience during a pandemic, during a crisis. And it's
Yeah.
something so simple as just seeing a bridge, but it's so impactful for her. And at this point, probably her existence, that I'm very much looking forward to seeing these silver lining projects and learning from these people and getting a better understanding of this community experience too.
And I think too, when you mentioned the art piece, so there's a couple of people who are in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area, who are art educators, art museum staff, employees. I'm not sure on all their titles, so I'm just going to generalize and say staff. For various reasons, there have been furloughs and ups and downs and that ebb and flow of work there. And one of them, Natalia, has been doing drawings, and she's posted some of them to the archive. And it's just this way of contributing a visual art form. So she is doing these drawings, and she wanted to contribute to the archive to share her work in this way as a COVID drawing that she had done. And a colleague in Canada, Emma, is working on doing this survey where she's been asking people to share their COVID experience, particularly workers in the museum space and cultural heritage institutions. And through that, we've been learning about people's experiences in museums. And when you see that then reflected in the archive, you begin to connect those dots. So you have both the taking the time and the space to document or to draw or to do the genealogy, and you also have this time and space to document through a survey to say, this is my experience. This is what my experience in the museum space has been about. And so is it a COVID story? Is it a museum story? It's a human story. It's the story of humanity. And I think too, in this space, there's also the not unrelated national dilemma or reckoning that we're having now about race in our communities. And that is becoming evidenced in the archive as well. And so thinking about, yes, it is a journal of the plague year, but it's not called a pandemic archive. It's a chronicle of this particular year where we are facing a pandemic, but that's not the only thread of the conversation. So Ruth's pictures of the Holland Tunnel occur during this pandemic, but they're not just a pandemic story. They're, as you pointed out so eloquently, they're her artistic vision, and they're what she's seeing in the world around her, and they're the fact that she's actually thinking to take that view of the tunnel or that view of her neighborhood that gives her the artist viewpoint. So it's first and foremost her story that is the lens of COVID and the experience too. So yeah, I think it's really remarkable. I'm so grateful to be able to share these stories.
Mm-hmm. And we will be sure to put a link to the archive in the description of this video. And please, for anybody watching this video, we highly encourage you to share your story. We would love to learn from you and connect with you no matter where you're at. We do have international presence on this archive too, so I hope that you check out the stories to learn about your community, your region, your state, your country, and even more from abroad. And Julie, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. I could talk about this way more than what we have time allotted for this program, but this is an Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science recording, and we thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye.